Welcome everyone to a conversation with Kelly Fyffe-Marshall, a director of Black Bodies and recipient of the 2020 Shawn Mendes Foundation Changemaker Award. No matter where you are joining us from, we encourage you to reflect on the land that you are on, who the traditional keepers of the land are, what the treaty relationship is, or if it's unceded territory.
We are currently located on the treaty lands of the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee. The territory is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are very grateful to work on this land and show the films made by Indigenous creators. My name is Emmanuel.
And my name is Deja, and we are members of the TIFF Next Wave Committee. We're a group of 12 young film lovers who get to plan youth-oriented events like the TIFF Next Wave Film Festival. Next year's festival will take place online February 12th to 15th and promises a jam-packed weekend with bold new films from around the world, digital Q&As, workshop talks, a throwback movies marathon, and special events for young film lovers. Stay tuned to find out more about TIFF Next Wave's Film Festival in January 2021.
Before we begin, I'd like to thank our lead sponsor, Bell, and our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa, and as our major supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. The TIFF Next Wave Committee is supported by the Slate Family Foundation, Learning Fund, and the Shawn Mendes Foundation. We were joined today by director Kelly Fyffe-Marshall to talk about her short film Black Bodies, her work as a changemaker, and the role of storytelling and art in fighting for racial justice and equity. Black Bodies was an official section at this year's Toronto International Film Festival and won the TIFF 2020 Shawn Mendes Foundation Changemaker Award, presented by the Shawn Mendes Foundation and selected by us, the TIFF Next Wave Committee. The award was established to celebrate a filmmaker whose work tackles the issues of social change. We chose Kelly Fyffe-Marshall's Black Bodies because it powerfully captures the emotional and physical trauma Black people experience and the injustice of police brutality. Through its striking visuals and sound design, combined with spoken word, the film reflects on our ongoing fight as young people to affirm that Black lives matter.
We were honored to present this award to Kelly, who uses her platform as a filmmaker to change perspectives, create healing, and shares powerful stories. She aims to leave every project she touches impactful, to make sure that even if in a small way, it changes the world. Her work includes short films, Haven, Marathon, and Black Bodies, which has also recently been selected for Canada's top 10. Kelly is currently in development of her debut feature, When Morning Comes. Thank you for joining us today, Kelly. Yeah, so my first question would be, I was asking if you could share a bit about your journey as an artist, how did you get started, and what inspired you to pursue filmmaking?
That's a good question. So I think my journey here has definitely been lifelong. I was a child actor when I was younger. I was born in England and raised in England, and I was a child actor there. I did theater, and then from theater I moved to Canada, and then I got put into leadership, which was like taking care of the theater plays. And then my high school had a TV program, got into that, then started volunteering at Rogers Television as a part of my co-op. Really enjoyed that, then went to school for TV. And then when I came out, it was a recession. When I graduated, it was a recession. And the world had made it switch from analog to digital. And so essentially I was jobless. And so decided to hire myself and do like music videos and like little commercials for people, which then turned into filmmaking. And then here I am.
My first question was, in interviews, you talk a lot about how Black Bodies was inspired by your own experience of being racially profiled and confronted by police in California. And you talk about how sadly this is like not a unique experience. And in the film, you wanted to kind of create the perspective of how it feels not only to have that singular experience, but like the experience of how it feels to live in Black skin in the 21st century. Can you speak to that at all? Like what inspired the story, like the origin of it, you know?
Yeah, me and my peers, Denisha, who plays the woman, Denisha Prendergast, she plays the woman in the film, and then Comey Olaf, who plays the man in the film, were in California, and we were racially profiled, and someone called the police on us for stealing. We were checking out of a rental property, and the police showed up with 7 police cars and a helicopter because they thought we were breaking and entering. And so in the moment, it felt very like, oh, this is a mistake, and it was kind of jokey. But like when coming back to Toronto and having to really relive it, it was very traumatic for me. And so I wanted to know like how, as someone who survived this incident, a lot of our fellow brothers and sisters don't get to survive these incidents. So as someone who is a survivor, what is my responsibility? As someone who's a filmmaker and activist, what is my responsibility? And so that was my chance to be like, okay, how can I not tell my experience, but tell the experience of so many? And so I thought about like, what are the emotions that I felt during that situation, and what is that something that I can portray and show people, so they really understand that if you don't live in Black skin, what that fear is like and what that situation is like. It doesn't matter what the variables of the situation are, but what it feels like inside.
It kind of is like looking back on it with like force, retroactively, like in the rearview mirror almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, honestly, that experience sounds so horrifying. I'm really sorry that you had to go through that. And that really like ties into my next question about how film can play the role of storytelling and how to like process trauma, but also create healing. So, yeah, if you could speak a little bit more about that, and also what the process looks like for you as an artist and a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think for me, I approach filmmaking in a different way. I don't think of it necessarily straight away as story, but I think about it as emotion. What are the emotions that I want people to feel? Which is why a lot of people feel the emotions they do when they watch my film. And so that's the way that I go at it. And I think about like, what are the emotions that I want to release and not necessarily transfer to someone, but I want them to feel for that moment so they understand what it's like. And so that's what I did. I wrote down all the emotions I was feeling, all the ways in which it made my body feel, and then I thought about in all the ways that I could tell a story that would also transfer that to other people. And for me, it was healing because it was a way for me to speak up for so many voiceless people, from so many people that have passed on, but also for so many people that like when I was when we were in the States after this incident happened, we went to a youth jail in New York City, and we're able to speak to them. And there was kids there that were like 12, and we're like, yeah, this happens to me all the time, like every day, like, and so and they don't have the platform that I do to be able to speak about it. And so being able to speak for those people that it happens for every day to make their life easier. What does it look like when that happens to you all the time? What does your life look like? Who are you as a person? How does that change you as a human? And so I think it's important that we give this outlook to so many people. There's people out there that have reached out to me and said, I didn't even know this happened. And it's because they're allowed to not know that, right? They're allowed to live in a world where their privilege allows them to have blinders on and not know that this is happening to people. And so it's important for me as a filmmaker that I take off your blinders and show you like, this is what's happening. And so it changes the way that you navigate, and then hopefully we can stop this happening.
Yeah. I mean, I think putting the viewer kind of like in the experience of like feeling as if they have to embody a Black body within watching the film, it kind of ties into like my second question. My second question was like directly related to the first shot. The first shot is like this haunting pedestal shot up from the ground. The camera is like flipped upside down, and it like instantly creates this like sadly like familiar but like disorienting feeling within me. And like that feeling only escalates all the way to the climax of the film. And so how do you think it was important to like kind of give the viewer that feeling, through camera movement, lighting? Why was it important to put the viewer in that mind state?
Yeah, I approached the film visually like it was a horror film, because I wanted people to understand that it's horrifying. It's not we don't see these things as horror films, thankful for like Jordan Peele and Get Out, but we don't see these situations as horrifying as they are. They're traumatic and we don't see it that way. And so that was important for me, for it to be, for me, like Black bodies and the bodies on the ground was like, what does it look like when all these hashtags that we've made that have all disappeared and we've all forgotten about? What is it like when they're all in one room? What does that feel like? Because I think if we saw all of the hashtags that we've been building up for the last 5 years in one room, would be pushing for change more. And I mean, this is a great year to be speaking about this because, you know, this has been the year of the real push and a year of hope when it comes to Black revolution and the evolution after. But it definitely, when I was making this film, it was like, what would we do if we saw all of the bodies of the past? We get to forget about it in the 24 hours, 36 hours after the hashtag fades away. But what does that really look like if we have to confront all of these things at the same time? And so those were the two things that I really wanted to push when making this film. Like, I wanted it to be horrifying and to be a horror film, but also not a horror film. And I wanted us to really confront our past.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. One of the things that I found like really unique about your films and your shorts were like the thing about like having that Black female narrative, especially because one thing that I've like seen in a lot of the new hashtags and a lot of the new conversations, like a lot of them are largely surrounded around the Black male narrative, which is like extremely important given like the police brutality, but oftentimes the Black female narrative is forgotten in those conversations. But like what really touched me about like Black bodies was that we had that Black female narrative. So why do you find it's important to integrate that Black female narrative? And yeah, just a little bit about your experience in that.
Mm-hmm. For Black bodies, it was super important to me because who gets left behind? You know, when the Black man is killed, who gets left behind? Who has to pick up the pieces? Who has to raise the children? And who has to scrub the blood off of the concrete? It's the Black woman. And so I really wanted to like show like and also like what kind of person gets left behind? Are they now hardened? Are they now angry? Are they now hurt? Are they now traumatized? Do they now have PTSD? And then do we now look at them and say Black women are angry? So that's something that I think is important, like something that will be a through narrative through all of my films. Like, who do we leave behind in these situations, and why do we have the opportunity to blame them? How can we blame them for things that we're doing to them? And I say we, it's not us, but you know, like the society. And so that's super important to me. Like, who gets left behind, and the moments in between are like through themes for all of my work. With Haven, which is my project before, it was about children's sexual assault. And so for me, it was like, what is the situation? I leave it at a place where I don't give you any answers. And that's because I want you to have the answers. I want you to figure it out so that no one in your circle, within your community, has the same issues. You know, and so that you can look out for the children in your communities. And so that's my through line, like who gets left behind and what are we going to do about it? That's my call to action with all of my films.
Yeah,
I think that's super like emblematic of continuing the conversation after the event. You know, it doesn't stop when, like you said, when the hashtags stop or the movement on social media or the news stops. It continues to run through what is happening. And even though your film was when the film came out and premiered at TIFF, it was in that moment that we were having back in September. But I think like as is emblematic of today, like we're still having that conversation. Can you like speak to like why it is important to keep that going?
I mean, until it stops, you know, until I always say, I'm going to say Black Lives Matter until you show me that my life matters. You know, and so I can't stop saying it until you show me, because then I won't have anything to say anymore. And so that's why this movement will continue until Black people and Indigenous people and other people of color, trans folks, queer folks, until everyone feels like they matter. We can't stop saying these things. The movement can't stop. You know, people are being killed every day, and nobody believes them until they have a camera. Until we see the video and get to watch 9 minutes of someone being kneeled on is when we believe. You know, the whole world had to watch that for that to be something that changed the world. We all had to be stuck at home during a pandemic for us to really find movement in that. And so I think until I feel like my life matters, I'm not going to stop saying it.
Absolutely. And I like one thing that I really love about your work is like how you show that like all Black lives matters and like how many different perspectives are in there. and how much different pain is in every player in that relationship. So yeah, I really like that. I really, really loved Haven as well. Yeah, and one thing that I just wanted to note or kind of bring up was like the setting of Black Bodies, like the industrial feeling to it, kind of brought me back to a prison cell and connected me to that relationship between the prison industrial system and the profit off of Black bodies. So was that something that you were going for, like through the atmosphere, or like something maybe like you were thinking with your relationship? Yeah, if you could expand on that.
Yeah, that's definitely it. That's you picked it up. It is that industrial complex. Like what like Black bodies are profitable in so many ways when they're dead and when they're alive, when they're in jail and when they're free. And so, what does this look like? What does this warehouse look like now that they're dead? And so that's really what it was. It was like speaking to being in prison, speaking to even like the warehouse is dirty. So like speaking to like the environments of government housing, you know. So it touches on all of those things and why it's a product of who we are.
Another question we had was, what are it's kind of derailing a bit, but what are some of your inspirations as an artist? Where do you get like inspiration from? What, aside from the movements and stuff like that, filmmakers, other things like that?
Mm-hmm. You know, I really enjoy watching artists do art, like in any shape or form. I'm the type of person that will like go to a concert and just watch them, and I'm like, look at them loving what they're doing. Like that just brings so much joy. I love like watching singers sing and just be like really into it and really feel it. I find inspiration in so many different things, like in like learning about my past, like my family history. I find inspiration in just having conversations with my friends. I have a really great sisterhood, so I find inspiration in that. I definitely think music is a big thing. Books is huge for me. And then like filmmakers, like obviously Ava DuVernay is a big inspiration. I love Spike Lee. I love a lot of Korean filmmakers. One of my favorite films is Stoker. I love The Foreigner. I love The Prisoner. Yeah, I find inspiration in like so many different weird things. Like if I see someone like just having fun or just like in their limelight, I'll just stand and watch them, and just the joy that they feel. Like in human experiences, really, like in any way someone can experience being a human, especially during these times. That's how I'm inspired.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, that's really sweet. Honestly, yeah, I feel like, I mean, like I personally like visual arts. Like that's what I kind of want to pursue when I'm like, I know, I guess become an adult. But I like a lot of inspiration from film. Like I've gotten a lot of inspiration from your films. Yeah, and I feel like, you know, being in the arts is all like, it's really all encompassing. So I really love that. Yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about kind of like, I was watching your TEDx special from last year, and I like really like resonated with like how you talked about like how you made films before, but they weren't like really confronting the real like issues about like Black lives. And I was wondering, like, you know, as an artist and a filmmaker, can you speak about like how important it is for your films to reach a wide audience, as well as if there's anything that surprised you about the reaction that you received from Black bodies, especially because like your films, Black Bodies, and previous films were created before the George Floyd era, where like those conversations were really necessary. So, well, I mean, of course they were necessary, but like,
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I think like reactions were, I think a lot more people paid attention. I think that's also the great thing about the film being 4 minutes. I think like, you know, we live in this era where everyone wants to quickly watch a TikTok video, and then they're like that's how they want to consume their content. And so it being 4 minutes made it something that people could consume easily, but not realize that they needed moments to really de-stress after and really take it in. And I think more people watched it because they're like, oh, it's just 4 minutes, but then didn't realize like it took them a whole day to really get through it. But yeah, so the reactions were interesting. A lot of Black folks that saw my piece like marathon, which is the first part of Black Bodies that was available online, and I released that because it was about running, running for your life and running to what you need to run to, running away from what you need to run away from. And so I released that first because Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, and he was murdered while running. And so that, like, a lot of people were spreading that, and then when Black Bodies came to TIFF, spreading that, and Black folks were spreading it because they wanted people to feel what they felt without having to keep talking about it. It's exhausting to continue to speak about it, and this gave them the option to send it to their friends and be like, this is it. We don't have to talk about it after, but I just want you to feel this for a second. And so I thought that was really interesting and important. It speaks to like being the voice for people. But I always assumed that I was being the voice for the people that had gone through it, but not just that, but the people that experienced it. And that was something that was interesting to me. Like, people that who see Black bodies be murdered all the time still were able to use this as a way to speak about the trauma that they feel from that. A lot of non-Black folks reached out to me and said, thank you. Like, we didn't know, and it gave us a glimpse into what that experience was. And they don't know if they'd have been able to see it in that space before. Film gives you such a way where you can be comfortable and let your guard down. And so it was the opportunity to have a real conversation with themselves after that. And so I think that was super important and interesting.
I think that is kind of like super emblematic of like what you said before about having the viewer have to experience it. You know what I mean? You said the 4 minutes that the film is 4 minutes 30 seconds. It's like the film isn't really that long, It goes on past that. And I think that's really it's kind of a cool way to tell the story, like you said, in the kind of climate we're in, where everybody wants to watch something 2 or 3 minutes, and that'll kind of like validate them instantly. So like, kind of tied to that, is there any like advice you'd give to people who are making films now, and like kind of how, especially I think people of color, young filmmakers, how to kind of like go about telling your story in the industry that we are in today?
Yeah, I mean, when I learned how to make films, I learned the beginning, middle, end, the A story, the B story. I learned 10 minutes is a great space to be in. And I learned all of these things, and I struggled with it for a long time because it didn't feel natural. And then I remember going to a TIFF short film presentation, and I watched the films, and I was like, these films don't all stick to the rules. And then I literally went home and wrote my film. And so my advice is, like, read all the rules about all the things you're supposed to do, and then do what makes you happy. Like, within those rules, break them if you need to, but know you know why you're breaking them, and then make the best film you can. I think the shorter the film, the bigger the punch has to be, which is what I'm able to do with my films. But just don't feel like you have to stick to one thing or do it one way. Just do what your soul wants to do.
Yeah, just to jump off of Manuel's question, and also kind of like stay in the realm of like shorts. Yeah, I definitely did feel like when I was watching Black Bodies and the previous shorts that I really did have to watch it 2 or 3 times to really digest it, and still like there was questions that I was like being left with, or stuff I was reflecting on like the next day, being like, oh, like I didn't see it in that light before. But in the future, do you think that you're going to remain doing shorts, or are you looking to do more like feature length, or like maybe just a question about what you're planning for in the future?
I'm actually in pre-production for my first feature right now. It's called When Morning Comes, and it's the emigration story of a Jamaican boy moving to Toronto. And he's been sent here for a better life, and he's sent to live with his grandma, who lives in Jane and Finch. And so what does that look like? Is it really a better life? That's what we're taught. And so just having a conversation, a socioeconomic conversation, a conversation about race, because in Jamaica, race isn't a thing, classes, but here race is a thing. Having all of those conversations through the lens of a little 10-year-old boy who's being sent here, it mirrors my immigration story. I came to from England when I was 10. And so, just having that, what's snow, all of these conversations. Yeah, and so yeah, when morning comes, I'm in pre-production. I go to Jamaica in a couple weeks, and then I shoot in March. COVID willing, I shoot in March.
COVID willing, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like amazing. And I just guess like this really has like illuminated like just kind of like the need for creators of color because like my family's Jamaican and my mom and her sister and her brother they moved to Canada at the age of 9 and like there were like, really big like growing pains and also like adjustment struggles. So yeah, it just really like it's really cool to like know that there's going to be a film out there that will like illuminate their experience like that. Yeah, I love
it's so important that we tell our stories because we don't realize that our stories are your stories and your stories and like everybody's stories and everyone can like you don't even have to be Jamaican. You could be from like Zimbabwe, you can be from India, you could be from Afghanistan, but you find that moment you're like, yeah, I was an immigrant, or I know someone who immigrated, or my mom did, and now I know why she's like that, and I just think that there's so many, like, telling your own story, it really just is a story for everybody, and I think that's what's important that people know.
Well, yeah, thank you so much. I want to thank you like personally for Black Bodies. That film was so amazing. And I mean, I think that's all the questions we have, right,
well,
Deja?
Thank you guys. The questions were amazing, and thank you guys for watching, and I really appreciate it. You had really great questions.